Chapter 1. Sabrina Scott walked out of prison before dusk fell. She had been temporarily bailed out of jail for one day. Holding a slip of paper with an address on it in her hand, she took a bus at the gate of the prison. She arrived at an old mansion halfway up the mountain when it was almost nightfall. The doorman then led Sabrina into a bedroom. The bedroom was pitch black, and she smelled thick, pungent blood as soon as she entered. Before she had adapted herself to the darkness in the room, a pair of strong arms grabbed her, and she fell into a man's embrace. A hot breath blew by her ear. "So, you are what they sent for me to enjoy before my death, the call girl." "Call girl?" Sabrina's tears came rolling down her eyes. She suddenly felt frightened, and her voice trembled. "Are you dying soon?" "Yes. Do you regret doing my business?" The man sneered faintly. "I don't regret it," Sabrina said miserably. She had no room for regret, because her mother was waiting to be saved by her. Although she could not see the man's face in the darkness, she could feel the man did not seem like somebody who was dying. A couple of hours later, the man finally fell asleep. "Is he dead already?" Sabrina had no time to be in fear, and she quickly fled the mansion. At that time, the night sky began to rain heavily. She ran in the rain to the Lynn residence. It was 11 o'clock at night, and the door to the Lynn residence was locked. However, Sabrina could hear the joyful noise in the house, as if there was something worth celebrating. "Open the door. Quickly, open the door and give me the money. I need to go save my mother. Open the door. Open the door." The door was still locked. She was muddle-headed, and was a little unsteady on her feet at this point, because she had waited for the bus in the rain for a long time, before she had to run to Lynn residence. However, she had to brace herself up and kept banging hard on the door of Lynn residence. "Open the door. Open the door. Quickly give me the money. I need to go save my mother." Bang! The door was pushed open from inside, and Sabrina's despaired gaze suddenly sparkled. The person behind the door looked at Sabrina with contempt and disgust. Sabrina knew that she looked worse than a beggar now. However, she could not care for her image now. She rushed up and looked at the person with a pleading look in her eyes. "I have done what you asked me to do. Quickly give me the money. My mother's life cannot wait any longer, please." "Your mother is dead, so you no longer need the money." The person who opened the door threw a black-framed picture into the rain, then mercilessly closed the door. "What?" Sabrina was stupefied as she stood motionless in the heavy rain. Long afterward, she let out a harsh cry. "Mother! Mother! I was late, wasn't I? I missed the timing to save you, didn't I? My mother is dead. My mother is dead." Sabrina hugged her mother's coffin portrait, curled up in the rain, and muttered to herself. She then crawled up and started to bang on the door like a crazy person. "Liar! I've done what I've promised you, but you didn't save my mother. Return my mother to me. Liar! Your whole family will die horribly. Liar! 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 I curse that your whole family will have a terrible death." Sabrina fainted for crying too much outside the door of the Lynn residence. When she woke up, 3 days had passed, and she was in prison again. She was sent to the medical care area when she was in a coma, because she had a high fever. Her fever came down after 3 days, and she was returned to the original imprisonment area. A few female inmates came and surrounded her. I thought she was released and freed after being bailed out, but she was sent back in again just after 3 days. I heard she was lent out to be toyed with for a night. The well-built female gang leader pulled Sabrina's hair and let out a burst of sinister laughter. What a good life this woman had. Watch me beat her to death today. Sabrina did not even bat an eyelid. Let them beat her to death. If she were beaten to death, it would be perfect for her to reunite with her mother. As the women started to strip Sabrina's clothing, a stern voice came from the door. "What are you doing?" The female gang leader instantly put on a fake smile. "Sabrina was sick. We were just concerned for her." The correctional officer did not answer, but shouted Sabrina's prison code. 036, "Come out." Sabrina walked out and asked indifferently, "What did I do wrong now?" "You have been acquitted," the correctional officer said blankly. "What?" Sabrina thought she hallucinated. It was until when she was out of the prison door that she realized it was real. She cried tears of joy and murmured, "Mother, I couldn't save you, but could you forgive me?" I will see you now. Where are you buried? Are you Miss Scott? A man's voice came coldly. And then a man in a suit stood before Sabrina. Right behind the man, there was a black car stopped. Sabrina could vaguely see a man with shades was watching her from the car. She nodded. Yes, that's me. You. The man did not answer but turned around and spoke politely to the man in shades seated in the car. Young Master Sebastian, it's her. Bring her over. The man in shades ordered. Sabrina, who was still confused, was pushed into the car and sat next to the man in shades. She immediately felt a cold, murderous aura coming from him. Sabrina felt her life was in his hands. I am Sebastian Ford. The man introduced himself coldly. Sabrina could not help but shivered and asked gently, I have not been acquitted. But I am going to receive my death sentence, right? I'm taking you to get a marriage certificate. Sebastian was reluctant to even look at her once more. Sabrina suddenly thought his voice was familiar. It sounded like the man that died that night. However, the man had died. What did you say? She thought she had heard it wrong. Chapter 2. Sebastian did not look at Sabrina. You heard me. Sabrina fiddled with the edges of her filthy clothes and said in a soft voice, Sir, this joke is not funny at all. Sebastian sneered and said sharply, Wasn't it your plan to be married to me all along? Sebastian's gaze cut through Sabrina's thin sunken face like a sharp razor and stared into her eyes. Sabrina shuddered and turned her head away. But Sebastian squeezed her chin and forced her to look at him. Sabrina then realized that the features under the shades had a cool and beautiful outline. God definitely favored him, because he looked so handsome. Moreover, that black stubble on his jawline exuded incomparable rugged masculinity. His suit was well-tailored and looked luxurious. Sabrina could tell this man was a very distinguished person. In contrast, she was wearing worn-out clothes covered in mold, with disheveled hair and dirty face. Moreover, her body was smelly because she had not showered for days. The two of them were going to get a marriage certificate? Sabrina lowered her gaze and said softly, Sir, do you think because I have been in jail for 2 years and had not seen any man, I would simply marry any random ugly man, even if I had not met him before? Sebastian could not help but took another look at her. She was quite young, but had a sharp tongue, and was extraordinarily calm. His disgust towards her inevitably increased. Are you deliberately using this method to anger me and to arouse my interest in you? As soon as he finished, he did not wait for Sabrina to answer but immediately ordered the driver. To the city hall. Let me go. I don't even know you. Sabrina was horrified and wanted to get out of the car. With a backhand motion, Sebastian pinned her against the seat with his elbow, glared at her with a sinister gaze, and said in a cold voice, Woman, listen up. You will be dead if you dare to get off the car. Sabrina was scared. She had tears tumbling in her eyes, and she said in a weak voice, I don't want to die. To the city hall. The man ordered again. Young Master Sebastian, do we go straight to the city hall? Asked the assistant in the front passenger seat. Sebastian looked puzzled. The assistant looked at Sabrina and said bluntly, Young mistress' clothes are worn and old, and she looked dirty. Return to the Ford residence. The man gave another order. Yes, Master Sebastian. The driver started the engine. 1.5 hours later the car stopped. Sabrina got out of the car and saw the grand mansion that was the Ford residence. It was located halfway up the mountain. There was a world of difference compared to the mansion located halfway up another mountain that she had seen 3 days ago. This looked like a palace, whereas the mansion from 3 days ago was like a dilapidated prison. The man that took her innocence would probably be a death row inmate. She was still lost in her thoughts when Sebastian grabbed her wrist. When he pulled her along and strode forward, she had to jog behind like a stray puppy, because she was much shorter than him. The maids in the mansion bowed politely upon seeing the man. Welcome back, young Master Sebastian. The man led Sabrina through the main house towards the low-leveled rooms in the yard. He handed Sabrina to a few maids and said, Find some clean clothes for her, and let her take a bath. Yes, Master Sebastian. The maids answered and brought Sabrina to the bathroom. She must escape from here. She could not be with a man that wished to have her killed, but still wanted to get the marriage certificate with her right after she came out from prison. Sabrina was so deep in her thoughts that she did not realize the maids had already taken most of her clothes off. The maids sighed together. Those bruises on her neck seemed to be love bites. When Sabrina had regained her focus, she frantically bit her lips and said, "I'm not used to others bathing me. Please leave, and I will bathe myself." One of the maids asked, "You are young Master Sebastian's." Sabrina quickly interjected and said, "Maid, bathe yourself then." The maids turned around and left him politely. When they went out, one of the maids let out a cold snort in a sarcastic way. "I thought she was young Master Sebastian's woman. She turned out to be only a maid. She looked like a promiscuous thing. Who did she think she was to let us bath her?" When the maid looked up, she saw Sebastian standing right outside the bathroom. The maid immediately shut her mouth in fear. In the bathroom, Sabrina looked at herself in the mirror with her face flushed red. Her most precious first time was taken by a man whom she had never even met. In addition, she would never know what he looked like forever. She shut her eyes, and tears glided from her cheeks to her neck. "You really are a filthy woman," said a harsh male voice. Sabrina opened her eyes in a panic. Sebastian was looking at her neck with disgust. Sabrina frantically covered herself with her clothes. The tears of anger and shame came sliding down her face. "I was just released from prison, and you kidnapped me here. I don't know you. No matter how filthy I am, it has nothing to do with you, right? Please get out." Sebastian's disgusted gaze landed on Sabrina's face, but he could not identify her tell that showed that she was acting. This woman truly was a skilled swindler. "Follow me to get our marriage certificate, once you're done washing up. 3 months later, I would divorce you, then pay you a certain amount of money. When that time comes, if you wish to stay beside me for even one more second, it would not be possible." Once he finished his sentence, he closed the door and left. The maids in the yard dared not breathe too loudly, because Sebastian was present. 4 days ago, at this house, all the maids had witnessed how vicious and domineering this newly appointed head of the Ford family can be. Sebastian was the 4th son of his father, and his father was the eldest son of the Ford family. His 3 brothers and him were not born by the same mother. He was an illegitimate son. Although the Ford family was a century-old noble family, AB** starred like Sebastian would not have the eligibility to inherit even a tiny portion of the Ford family's fortune. In the Ford family, the collateral descendants even had priority over him for inheritance. When he was a teenager, he had been driven into exile. However, he finally fought his way back one day and managed to return to his country, but his mother was framed and imprisoned. Since then, Sebastian had been calculating every step meticulously and executing his plan in secret. Finally, he faked his death 3 days ago and engaged a counterattack. As a result, he drove his opponents to an end and had successfully gained control over the whole Ford family. In the current Ford family, Sebastian has the final say. Sebastian could only feel coldness in his gut whenever he recalled his past. His mother did not willingly become the 3rd person in his father's marriage. It was a trick used by his father's wife to keep his father in their marriage. When Sebastian's mother found out that his father had a family, she was already 9 months pregnant. In order to let her son grow up in the company of parents, his mother had no choice but to stay by his father's side and suffered humiliation in silence. She was even framed and imprisoned when she was in her middle age. When Sebastian finally gained control of the Ford family and got his mother out of prison, she only had 3 months to live. His mother only had one wish. She wanted him to take her cellmate, Sabrina Scott, as his bride. Sebastian could only obey her wish, seeing that his mother did not have much time left. The night before he decided to take Sabrina out of prison, he had done a thorough investigation on her. His investigation showed that this woman had an ulterior motive for getting close to his mother. "Something's wrong, young Master Sebastian." The maid's frightened exclamation interrupted his thoughts. Sebastian's gaze instantly turned serious. "What are you panicking about?" "That woman escaped by jumping out of the window," the maid said in fear. Chapter 3. What? A frown instantly formed on Sebastian's face, and he immediately rushed in the bathroom. There was nobody in the bathroom, but on the wall, a line of words written in blood was left. "Mr. Ford, despite our substantial differences in terms of social status, I wouldn't want to marry you, farewell. The handwriting was neat and sharp, which revealed the writer's unyielding trait. Sebastian was stunned by it. Could his investigation result on her be wrong? A few seconds later he gave an order. Search the back of the mountain. He could not let his mother have any regrets before she died. At the back of the mountain, holding onto thorns and vines to go down, Sabrina managed to escape the search from the Ford family by hiding under a dense vine. Despite having her clothes torn, she stayed there till nightfall and went around the mountain by climbing over. Early morning on the following day, she went to the Lynn residence again. Lincoln Lynn and Jade Sullivan were shocked and panicked when they saw Sabrina. How did you escape from prison? Jade asked with a guilty expression. Sabrina said mockingly, Mrs. Lynn, I have been released after serving my full sentence. You still shouldn't have come to our house. You're dirty and smelly, it's too pungent. Get out of here quickly. Jade forcefully chased Sabrina out of the house. Sabrina could not be bothered to even look at Jade. She only looked at Lincoln and asked, Uncle Lynn, your family knew very well why I was in prison back then, right? 4 days ago, you came to visit me in jail and told me if I followed the address given and stayed with a man for a night, you would give me a sum to save my mother. So I stayed with that man, but my mother died. Lincoln felt guilty but argued, everyone has their fate. I was kind and wanted to save your mother, but your mother died too soon. Could you blame me for that? Sabrina glared furiously at Lincoln. She had to pierce her nails into her flesh. Only then could she suppress her urge to rush up to Lincoln and bite him to death. This is because she did not have the capabilities to investigate whether her mother's death had any relations to the Lynn family yet. She gritted her teeth and asked calmly, Where was my mother buried? Lincoln answered in vague tone, Of course she was buried in the Soil Cemetery back at your hometown. I have paid for your living expenses and studies for 8 years. Do I still need to buy a premium cemetery plot for your mother? You ungrateful person, leave now. As Lincoln closed the door, he tossed $1,000 and said, This was for your service that night. A stab in Sabrina's heart could be felt every time that night was mentioned. Even she felt miserable. She still raised her chin high and stubbornly said, If someone had to pay, shouldn't it be that man who needed to pay me? Since he is dead, then there is no use for it. Besides, I'm not a call girl. The reason I promised you was, firstly, to save my mother, and secondly, to repay your kindness for nurturing me. So from now on our debt is cleared. 8 years living under the Lynn family's fence was enough. She would never return to the Lynn family in the future. If she were to be back, it would be to avenge her mother. As he watched a tattered-looking Sabrina leave the house with such determination, Lincoln suddenly felt a dull pain on his chest. Jade immediately scolded him furiously. Why? Do you feel sorry for her and her mother? Lincoln Lynn, don't forget she cursed my daughter to death. They were born on the same day. Why does she get to live, and my daughter died right after birth? Lincoln said, I am not feeling sorry for her. The most important thing now is that she is out of prison. If she knew the man that she had slept with did not die, but became the head of the Ford family, then we are going to be in big trouble. Jade sneered and said, She didn't even know who she slept with. What are you afraid of? The most important thing now is to let Sebastian marry our precious daughter. If Celine had Sebastian's child, nobody could bully us again. Lincoln sighed and said, Old Master Ford takes family backgrounds very seriously. I'm worried that he would dislike Celine for being our adopted daughter. Jade laughed with a hint of craziness. Dislike? Sebastian is an illegitimate child. He didn't even have the eligibility to inherit the power. But he still managed to take over the whole Ford group overnight. As long as Sebastian believes that Celine was the girl who sacrificed her innocence to save him, then nobody could stop them from getting married. Lincoln, you just wait for our precious daughter to marry into South City's #1 wealthy family and be Sebastian's wife. Lincoln nodded happily. The sorry feeling that he had for Sabrina disappeared without a trace. At that moment, Sabrina had already walked more than 100 meters away. Then, as she was about to turn into the main road, a showy bright red sports car blocked her way. Celine Lynn came down from the car in heels and came to Sabrina arrogantly. Isn't this the broke woman who had been begging at our house for 8 years? Sabrina, how many men have used you? And you still haven't showered. Your odor is killing me. Came to beg at my house again? You're already selling your body anyway. Why are you still so thick-skinned? Slap. Sabrina raised her wrist and hit Celine right across her face. Celine instantly had a clear 5-finger print on her face. She touched her face and put her fingers to her nose and sniffed them. Not surprisingly, they smelled. She was filled with anger and roared. You dare to hit me? Sabrina's tone was dull and impatient. It's great now you are just as dirty and smelly as me. She turned around and left as soon as she finished her words. Her coldness shocked Celine. Celine was so stunned that she did not chase after Sabrina to fight. Sabrina came to the dirtiest and most seedy place in South City and rented a bed to rest temporarily. She wanted to find a job in South City so as to save up some money to return to her hometown. But no employers were willing to hire her because she had been in prison before. In order to get a job, she spent some money to get a fake identification card and assumed the identity of Layla Young. After a few days, she managed to get hired as a waitress at a fine dining restaurant under the pseudonym of Layla Young. The wage was little, but Sabrina was very satisfied. 3 weeks later, she was promoted to be the waitress that was dedicated to serving the VIP rooms because of her hard-working, sweet and gentle appearance. Layla differed from the lobby dining area. VIP rooms were filled with esteemed guests. Hence, you have to be careful not to make mistakes. The manager called Sabrina by her pseudonym and explained to her carefully. Sabrina nodded and said, I know. Another week passed. She did very well at work. During her spare time, a few other waitresses chatted with Sabrina. You're so lucky, Layla. You got promoted to serve the VIP rooms in such a short time. However, with your height of 170 centimeters, tiny face, and long legs, let alone a promotion to be the VIP room waitress, you would have no problem becoming an air stewardess, model, or even enter the entertainment industry. Sabrina pursed her lips and walked off with her head bowed. The few colleagues extended their warmth, but were met with a cold response. So after Sabrina had walked off, they muttered behind her back. Just a waitress at the VIP rooms, so arrogant. She just has a pretty face. Who does she think she is? I didn't think she was that pretty. Maybe just a comely face at best. But her personality was seriously cold and aloof. She has no culture or academic background, but she is so pretentious. She is not pretentious, just doesn't talk much, and she is trustworthy. If you don't believe me, look. One of the colleagues suddenly called for Sabrina. Layla, my stomach is upset. Could you help send the dishes? Sabrina nodded. No problem. My room is the Platinum VIP room on the 3rd floor, thanks. She sped off as soon as the sentence ended. Under the shocking gaze of the others, Sabrina went up to the 3rd floor. She took over the dishes from a waitress before she pushed the door open and entered the room. She had her head bowed and focused on serving the dishes when her wrist was suddenly caught. Sabrina shuddered and looked up at the customer. She was immediately stunned. A cold, stern face with a gaze that had an overbearing and arrogant force appeared before her face. How did you know I dine here often? Sebastian gripped her hand tightly. His eyes glinted with murderous intent. Chapter 4. Sebastian had been looking for Sabrina for a month. When he thought that Sabrina might not as bad as his investigation, she appeared as the waitress in the room specially dedicated to him. He really had underestimated her. Director Ford, what's the matter? The restaurant manager who was accompanying Sebastian trembled as he looked at Sebastian. How long has she been here? Sebastian looked coldly at the manager. A month, stuttered the manager. A month. It was exactly the time after she escaped the Ford family. She was not trying to escape, she only wanted to increase her price. D*MN. Sabrina looked at Sebastian with resentment and felt wronged. How could the world be so small? I don't understand what you're saying. Let me go. If not, I would call the police. She tried her best to free herself from Sebastian's restraint, but she could not move at all. Sabrina was in so much pain that a thin layer of sweat started to form on her forehead. The manager scolded Sabrina in fright. Layla Young, you've gone too far. Sebastian sneered. Layla Young? You concealed the fact that you were just released from prison by changing your name to Layla Young. At that moment, the lobby supervisor, the same waitress who asked Sabrina to take her place, rushed over, but was too frightened to speak. Sabrina was in despair. She only had 2 days left to collect her paycheck this month. However, everything fell through again. Why do you always refuse to leave me alone? Why? Her eyes were instantly reddened in anger and frustration. She suddenly lifted her wrist and bit Sebastian's arm, which made Sebastian release his grip due to pain. Sabrina turned around and ran away as quickly as she could. She could not fight with anyone, so she could only run. When Sebastian finally reacted, Sabrina had already run out of the restaurant and quickly got on a bus. She got off after a few stops. When she was walking on the road, she suddenly started bawling uncontrollably. She went to prison in Celine's place for a month. A dead man took her most precious first time. Finally got out of prison with great difficulty, but could never see her mother again. Hasn't she been unlucky enough? What kind of demon is this man named Ford? Why was he so determined not to let her go? Why? Was it because she just came out of prison and had no one to rely on? So it looked nice to be bullied? Sabrina bawled until her gut was upset. In the end, she squatted at the roadside and vomited continuously. However, all she vomited was green acidic liquid because she had not eaten. A woman who had just passed by patted her on her back and said, "Girl, are you experiencing early pregnancy symptoms?" Early pregnancy? Sabrina shuddered. She had frequently felt nauseated recently, but it never crossed her mind that she could be pregnant. After the reminder from the woman, she suddenly remembered that it had been more than a month since that night. She came to the hospital in a panic and held only a few $10 in her hands. It was not even enough to do any test. The doctor gave Sabrina a test strip to do a urine test. 10 minutes later, the doctor said affirmatively, "You're pregnant." Sabrina staggered for a moment. "No, I can't be pregnant. The pregnancy could be aborted," the doctor said coldly, and then looked outside. Next, Sabrina walked out of the room, sat by herself on the hospital bench, and felt helpless. Don't cry, wipe tears." A babbling, cute voice was heard. She looked up and saw a little girl that was still in diapers standing in front of her. The little girl raised her chubby little hands to wipe away Sabrina's tears but failed. Hence, she patted Sabrina's legs to comfort her instead. Sabrina's heart instantly melted by what this little girl did. "Please excuse me, my baby is an amiable and emotional child." The young mother stood opposite of Sabrina and smiled. "Your baby is very cute," Sabrina replied politely. She looked with envy at the mother and daughter as they walked away. She could not help but to touch her lower abdomen. She already had no family. The baby in her belly was her only flesh and blood. A sense of joy and expectations of being a new mother came all over her. However, what can she use to feed and support the baby? She could not even afford the abortion surgery. Early morning the following day, Sabrina, with a glimpse of hope, came to the prison and begged the guard, "Can I please see Aunt Grace?" When Sabrina was first in prison, Grace Summer had already been serving in the prison for quite some years. Grace took care of Sabrina and saved her from a lot of trouble. She did not know Grace's background, but she could tell that Grace was rich. Every month, Grace would receive a lot of money from her visitors. Grace even gave her a few $100s at the time when Sabrina was released from prison. "Grace Summer had been released for more than a month," said the guard as he calculated the time. "What?" Sabrina was surprised. "You must be Sabrina Scott, right?" the guard suddenly asked. Sabrina nodded. "That's me. Grace left a number for you when she was released. On that day, you got in a luxurious car as soon as you got out. I shouted for you to stop, but you did not hear me." The guard handed a slip of paper with the phone number written on it to Sabrina. "Thank you." 2 hours later, in the VIP ward at the highest-end private hospital in South City, Sabrina met her cellmate Grace Summer. Grace's eyes were slightly closed as she laid on the bed sickly. However, her gray hair made her look more graceful and elegant. Sabrina could tell that she was a beauty when she was young, but Sabrina did not know why she would be imprisoned. "Aunt Grace." Sabrina called gently. Grace gradually opened her eyes. When she saw Sabrina, she was too excited that she started to cough for a while, then calmed down and said, "Sabrina, I could finally meet you. I asked that brat to bring you over, but he kept saying you went back to your hometown. You finally returned today. I'm glad that you are back." "I came back from my hometown, Aunt Grace." Sabrina liet. She knew the brat that Grace talked about must be her son. Sabrina finally understood why she could be acquitted earlier. It was because Grace's son spent a lot of effort to get her out. The fact that they were willing to get her out was already quite good. How would they still allow Grace to have such a poverty-stricken friend like her? The lie she told Grace about her returning to her hometown was not too much. I would never forget that I wouldn't have survived this long if it weren't for your care in prison, and I wouldn't be able to see my son again. Grace was so touched that she cried. Sabrina shook her head. It's nothing, Aunt Grace. I wasn't expecting a reward when I took care of you. At that moment, she was pondering how to ask ailing Grace for a loan. Finally, she bit her lips as if she had made a decision and said, Aunt Grace, I know I am not supposed to tell you this now, but I really had no choice. What happened? You're here by my side now. If you have any difficulties, you can tell me, Grace asked. Aunt Grace, could you loan me some money? Sabrina's head dropped very low. She dared not look at her. How much do you want? I'll give you. A gentle voice could be heard from behind her. Sabrina quickly turned her head and was so shocked that she could not speak smoothly. How could it be you? Chapter 5. The man that stood behind Sabrina was none other than Sebastian. The man looked at Sabrina with a faint smile. His mellow and warm voice was sensual and enchanting. Mom needs to rest to recover. Is there anything that you couldn't come to me for a solution? Why must you bother Mom? Sabrina was dumbfounded and speechless. The man put his arms around her and escorted her out before she could say no. Son, have a proper discussion about your marriage with Sabrina. You must treat Sabrina well, Grace shouted behind them. Don't worry, Mom. The man replied while closing the door to the ward. Sabrina was dragged by Sebastian and walked a long way. When they arrived at the end of the corridor, his warm expression on his face had changed to one of icy coldness. The man aggressively choked Sabrina's neck and pinned her down to the wall. His gaze was as sharp as a cold sword. Female prisoner, you have continuously tested my patience, and you dared to appear before my mother. Now you are too bold. If anything happens to my mother, I would make you experience things that are worse than death. Sabrina's face turned red from being choked. She said as she struggled, I didn't know Aunt Grace is your mother. She finally understood why Sebastian was disgusted by her, but still insisted on getting a marriage certificate with her. Previously in prison, Grace mentioned that she wanted her as a daughter-in-law in the future after they got out of prison. Sabrina thought Grace was joking with her at that time. It turned out that Grace was serious. The man choked her tighter. Do you think I would believe you? You had been playing hard to get repeatedly. Wasn't that to increase your price? Have you always wanted to marry the Ford family and be a noble lady? She did not wish to defend herself, so she just shut her eyes. Let him choke her to death. With this way, she could be with the baby in her belly forever, and even reunite with her mother. How nice would that be? Tears streamed down the corner of her eyes. However, the man released his grip. He had regained his composure. The tone of his voice was still frosty and domineering. My mother only has 2 months of life expectancy left. I must fulfill her wish and marry you. But I would not touch you. After 2 months, I would divorce you. When that time comes, you would get a sizable commission. I warn you not to play dirty tricks, or else I would make your life a living hell. Aunt Grace only had 2 months of life expectancy left. Sabrina felt a dull pain in her heart. She took in a few big breaths of fresh air. After a while, she calmly asked, You want to make a fake marriage deal with me? What else? Do you want to be my real wife instead? The man sized her up from top to bottom with a disgusted gaze. Sabrina instantly recalled the day in the room where he had seen her body covered in love bites left by the dead man. Of course, he would despise her for being filthy. Sabrina bit her lips and said, I could take the deal, but I have a request. Speak. Arrange an account for me in a big city. Any city will do. If she were to bring her child back to her hometown in the future, the people there would look down on the fatherless child. She did not want her child to face discrimination in the future. She wanted to bring her child far away from home. Sebastian looked at her skeptically. Only this. With strong determination, she said again, I want $30,000 in cash now as my allowance. $30,000 was enough for a pregnancy checkup at the hospital, expenses during her pregnancy, and in travel expenses for her return to her hometown to pay respects to her late mother. Sebastian sneered. Sure enough, this woman was still a greedy person to her bones. He already told her there would be a divorce settlement fee, but she still asked for a $30,000 allowance at one go. If he satisfied her with $30,000 today, then would she ask for $50,000 tomorrow? If he did not fulfill her wish one day, she could disappear and blackmail him into increasing the prices, right? It would be like filling a bottomless pit. What an abomination! How many people had been eliminated by Sebastian for being in his way in the past few years? He does not mind eliminating one more person like Sabrina. However, his mother could not wait any longer. Sebastian took his phone out and made a call. 5 minutes later, his assistant Kingston Yates came over with an envelope in his hand. Sebastian took $5,000 out of the envelope, handed it to Sabrina, then said condescendingly, "I can give you $30,000, but it must be paid in installments. If you behave well in front of my mother, then I will continuously give the rest of the allowance." $5,000? She needed to do pregnancy checkups, rent a new place to stay, go to interviews, and look for a job. How would $5,000 be enough? 10,000. Can't be any less than that. 2,000. The man's tone was so cold that it would send chills to the bones. 5,000, I only want 5,000. Sabrina quickly bargained. 1,000. Sabrina bit her lips with all her might to stop herself from crying. She realized if she were to bargain further, the man would decrease more. At least with $1,000, it would be enough for her to do a pregnancy checkup. 1,000. Sabrina cleared her throat and reached out to collect the money. However, the money was thrown on the floor by Sebastian. The man said condescendingly, "As long as you play your part right, I would draft the contract for the 2-month marriage and send it to you. Once the contract has been fulfilled, your commission would be paid in full. As for the allowance, you would only get it if you behave well." Sabrina was only focused on picking up money on the ground, so she did not hear what Sebastian had said. The $1,000 was important to her, that she could put her dignity aside. At least it was better than accepting handouts from the Lin family. "What did you say?" Sabrina turned up and asked Sebastian, after she picked up all the money. "What AB*TCH? Sebastian gave her a sidelong glance. "Come in with me. Remember to play your part right. If you say the wrong things—" "I won't say the wrong things," Sabrina said quietly. It was not that she wanted to cooperate with Sebastian, but she sincerely felt sorry for Grace. In prison they were like mother and daughter. Now Grace's life was about to end soon. She would still do her part even if Sebastian did not make a deal with her. The two of them entered the room together, and Sabrina wore a big smile on her face. "Aunt Grace, Sebastian and I were discussing getting the marriage certificate just now. You won't blame me for not accompanying you, right?" "Silly girl. I was hoping that you would have the wedding soon. Then my heart would be at ease." Grace held Sabrina's hand and pulled her closer, then whispered, "Sabrina, are you satisfied with my son?" Sabrina smiled shyly and said, "Very satisfied." "Go and get the certificate with Sebastian now, all right? I want to hear you call me Mom soon." Sabrina gently cupped Grace's hand. "As you wish, Aunt Grace." That afternoon, Sabrina and Sebastian went down to City Hall. They took a picture together, pressed their fingerprints together, and took their vows. However, even until their marriage certificate was stamped and completed, Sabrina still could not believe it was real. She had gotten married. Chapter 6. When they came out of City Hall, Sabrina said goodbye to Sebastian. "Mr. Ford, the doctors do not allow visitation in the afternoon, so I would not go back with you. I will visit Aunt Grace tomorrow morning." She was a person who knew boundaries of propriety. When she was not in front of Aunt Grace, she would take the initiative to distance herself from Sebastian. "Up to you," Sebastian said coldly. Sabrina left the place alone. In the car, Kingston asked, "Young Master Sebastian, aren't you afraid that she would escape?" Sebastian sneered contemptuously. "Escape? If she truly wanted to escape, why would she work as a waitress at the restaurant I visit often? Why would she also come to my mother for a loan? She only made the first 2 escapes to raise her price." Kingston said, "Who would say otherwise?" "Drive," said Sebastian. The car drove past Sabrina, but Sebastian did not even take a look at her. Sabrina dragged her tired body back to her place. She was stopped by somebody as she reached her door. "Sabrina, you're really hiding in this area." It was Celine. 2 years ago, due to her chaotic private life, Celine was taken advantage of by an old, ugly, and vulgar man. When the man had his guard down halfway through the intercourse, Celine used her heels and smashed through the man's head, killing him instantly. To help Celine get away with the crime, the Lin family got Sabrina drunk and secretly sent her into the meticulously faked crime scene. As a result, Sabrina had received a 10-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter. Celine, on the other hand, dodged a bullet and was not imprisoned. Whenever she thought of that, Sabrina wanted to strangle Celine to death. She looked at Celine indifferently. "How did you find me?" Celine became more complacent. "Sabrina, do you know what this type of place is called? Urban village. It is the only urban village in South City. The residents here are mostly streetwalkers. You can have a night with a streetwalker for only $5 here. One busy night can make $100. TSK, what a good amount of money. So, you came all the way to show off to me that you made $100 in one night?" Sabrina asked coldly. "You." Celine raised her hand and wanted to hit Sabrina, but she stopped her hand midair. She smiled and said, "I almost lost my composure. Let me tell you, I would be getting married soon, and the house needs to be renovated. The maids found a few pictures of you and your mother when clearing the trash." Sabrina asked eagerly, "My mother's pictures? Don't throw it. I would come and collect it." Her mother had passed away, so the pictures that were left behind were extremely precious to her. Celine asked nonchalantly, "When would you collect them?" "Tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow afternoon it is. Otherwise, all that trash would be pollutants if they spend one more day in my house." After saying that, Celine, surrounded with an air of pride, walked off in her heels. Not long after Celine left, Sabrina went to bed. She was now in her first trimester and had an extraordinarily tiring day of rushing around. So she wanted to rest early and get up earlier tomorrow to go to the hospital for a pregnancy checkup. The next day, Sabrina came early to queue at the ultrasound room in the hospital. When there was just one person left before her turn, she received a call from Sebastian and picked up the call. "What is it, Mr. Ford?" Sebastian's usual cold tone could be heard at the other end of the call. "My mother misses you." Sabrina saw that there was only one person before her, so she estimated the duration and said, "I would be at the hospital in about 1.5 hours. "Sure." Sebastian's reply was short and brief. Sabrina cleared her throat and said, I would do my best to cheer Aunt Grace up. Could you give me some more allowance? Could you deduct it from the divorce settlement fee?" "We'll talk when you're here." Sebastian immediately hung up the phone. He hated people who bargain with him the most. Sabrina continued to wait in line. As she was about to enter, an emergency patient was suddenly rushed in to do an ultrasound, which took more than half an hour. When it was finally Sabrina's turn, only then did she realize that she needed to start a medical record, because it was her first checkup. Her ultrasound was delayed for another half an hour. When she arrived at Grace's ward, she heard her crying inside. "You unfilial son, are you lying to me? I asked you where Sabrina is." "Mom, we already got our marriage certificate yesterday." Sebastian handed the certificate to his mother. "I want you to get Sabrina back here now." The elderly woman relentlessly pushed her son. "I'll go find her now." Sebastian stood up and came out. At the door, Sabrina met Sebastian's cold, sharp gaze. She hung her head, walked to the front of Grace's bed with a bag in her hand, and said warmly, "Aunt Grace, I'm the one who came late. I remembered you often said that you liked cream puffs when we were in prison, so I bought a box for you." Grace stopped crying and smiled. "Sabby, you still remembered that I love cream puffs?" "Of course." Sabrina handed a cream puff to Grace and said, "Have one, Aunt Grace." Grace looked eagerly at Sabrina. "Sabby, you should change the way you address me to Mom. Sabrina said. "Mom." "Yes," Grace said with a sense of gratification. "With you by Sebastian's side, I'll be at ease when I cross over to the other side." Sabrina suddenly teared up. "Mom, you're not allowed to say that. You can live a long life." After she managed to coax Grace to sleep, Sabrina came to Sebastian again and bit her lips. "Mr. Ford, could I have some allowance?" Sebastian's expression remained unchanged. He only said calmly, "You promised me to reach in 1.5 hours, and you only came after 3 hours. If you let me catch you leaving my mother hanging again, then it wouldn't only be a matter of money. Sabrina suddenly shivered. She could sense the calm murderous aura from his calm speaking tone. She knew he was not just saying that. She smiled self-deprecatingly. It's not easy to earn rich people's money. I understand. I won't ask you again. I want to confirm with you. You would set up an account in a big city for me, right? Sebastian replied. You won't receive anything less than the conditions written on the contract. Thank you. I have plans in the afternoon, so I would take my leave now. Sabrina left in a desolate state. Sebastian! Grace called out from her room. Sebastian immediately went into the room. Mom! I know you dislike Sabrina, but son, a lot of troubles and sufferings that I could not handle in prison were taken care of by Sabrina. I knew her better than anyone else. She is a righteous person who values her family and friends more than anything. With the number of times the Ford family had plotted against the two of us, wasn't it enough? I want to find you a partner that would never leave you. Do you understand my efforts? I understand, Mom. Sebastian nodded. Grace wanted to get out of the bed as she spoke. I want to personally call Aunt Quentin to ask if Sabrina is staying at your house. I could only be truly at ease if both of you are a proper, married couple. Sebastian was speechless. Right at that moment his phone rang. He immediately picked up the phone and coldly asked, What? At the other end of the phone, Celine acted in a cute and delicate voice. Darling Sebastian, I want to invite you to my house to discuss our marriage. Could you come? Pretty please. I'm not free today. Sebastian refused decisively. Chapter 7. Celine could tell that Sebastian disliked her immensely. She felt as if 10,000 needles were piercing her heart, making her feel pain, embarrassed, and annoyed. However, she was afraid of Sebastian. She was about to say a few more things with her fake cute voice. But the phone call ended abruptly. Celine's heart sank. What's wrong, Celine? Jade quickly asked. Mom, Master Sebastian. He didn't agree to come and discuss our marriage. He wouldn't find out about it, right? Celine started to cry in fear. He wouldn't find out that I am impersonating Sabrina, right? Mom, what should we do? Sebastian has the blood of countless people on his hands. I'm scared. Both Jade and Lincoln were scared out of their wits too. The whole family spent the entire afternoon in fear, until a maid came to report and said, Sir, madam, Sabrina is here. She said she is here to collect her and her mother's pictures. Tell her to get lost. Celine immediately released her anger on Sabrina. At this moment, Celine could only focus on being terrified. She had forgotten that she had asked Sabrina yesterday to come and collect the old pictures of her mother. What Celine initially intended was to publicly display her affection to Sebastian in front of Sabrina, so that Sabrina would be upset. However, she did not expect that Sebastian would reject her invite so decisively. The maid was speechless. Hold on. I will go speak to her. Celine got up and headed out. The whole afternoon of crying made Celine's eyes swollen, and her hair was incredibly messy. She forgot to take a look in the mirror and rushed out. B*TCH. You're a B*TCH that does that kind of business. You would taint my house again every time you come here. And we don't welcome you. Get lost now. Celine said viciously. Sabrina sneered. Celine, you're the one who asked me to come to collect my mother's pictures. Go. Go. Go to hell. Get lost now. Celine roared unreasonably. Sabrina was so angry that she laughed. She surveyed Celine. Suddenly, Sabrina realized Celine was throwing a temper tantrum for no real reason. Sabrina put on an innocent expression and asked nonchalantly, Celine, I could see your eyes are swollen, and your hair is as messy as a chicken's nest. Could it be that you got pregnant with a random man's child but got dumped? Celine was so furious that she made threatening gestures and wanted to jump on Sabrina. I'll beat you to death. Sabrina did not even bat an eye but just calmly said, You dare to beat me to death in front of your house. Could it be that you also wish to rot in prison? Celine yelled, You go to hell. Go. Right. Now. Go. Sabrina sneered, turned around and left. She did not have the time to fight with Celine. She was hungry and needed to eat. She got hungry easily ever since she was pregnant. She wanted something nutritious, but had no money. She had no choice but to return to where she lived, and bought a few mushroom sandwiches from a stall. As she was enjoying her sandwiches, a man suddenly stood in front of her. That man was Sebastian's assistant, Kingston. She was stunned for a second, but she continued eating her sandwiches. She walked past Kingston without saying a word and headed back to her place. Things between Sebastian and her were only a contractual deal. Other than having to act in front of Grace, they had no other relations. Sabrina had never taken the initiative to form connections just for her benefit. "Miss Scott," Kingston called behind her. He did not expect that Sabrina would not greet him. Sabrina turned around. "You called me." "Get in the car," Kingston said briefly. Sabrina was puzzled. "Madam would be calling home to inquire today. If she finds out that you and Master Sebastian were not staying together." "Understood." Once they started to act, they needed to stay in character. Sabrina got in the car. The place they went was not the Ford residence, but an upscale neighborhood in the city center. Kingston brought Sabrina to the ground floor of the building, and he left after he handed Sabrina over to a lady housekeeper who was in her 40s. "You must be the new young mistress, right?" The lady smiled while looking at Sabrina. Sabrina felt awkward. "You are?" The lady introduced herself. "I am Aunt Quinton, the housekeeper who had been serving Madam for more than 10 years. Madam specifically called to inform me and asked that I take good care of her daughter-in-law. Quick, follow me." This was a high-class duplex suite, which definitely not something any ordinary families could afford, and the luxurious level of the interior did not need further introduction. Sabrina asked Aunt Quinton, "This place is?" "This was the young Master Sebastian's former residence," said Aunt Quinton. Sabrina understood. It was Kingston who picked her up, so perhaps Sebastian would not come here. This was perfect. She no longer needed to worry about not having any place to stay anymore. She planned to bring her simple luggage over from the bed rental place tomorrow. The landline in the living room rang as soon as she sat on the couch. Aunt Quinton picked up the phone, smiled and said, "It's Madam." "Yes, she's here. Young mistress just sat on the couch." Aunt Quinton passed the landline to Sabrina. "It's Madam who's calling." Sabrina picked up the phone and said, "Ah, Mom, are you all right?" Grace asked gently. "Sabby, tell me, have you gotten used to the place?" Sabrina answered, "Very well. I have never lived in such a nice house." "Where's the brat? Is he there with you?" Grace asked again. Sabrina knew very well that if she was here, Sebastian would definitely not come over. However, she still said, "Sebastian would be back soon. I'm waiting for him to have dinner together." Good. Then I wouldn't disturb the two of you. I'll hang up now. Bye, Mom." During the evening, Sabrina had a sumptuous dinner, and Aunt Quinton even personally drew a bath for her. "Young mistress, these are essential oils, bath milk and rose petals. Using these to soak in the bath would ensure your skin becomes better. I've prepared a bathrobe for you and placed it outside the bathroom. You can pick it up when you get out. I will prepare the bed for you now." Aunt Quinton was a thoughtful housekeeper. Sabrina was a little overwhelmed by the pampered treatment she had received. Sabrina was attracted to the spacious bathroom, the large multifunctional bathtub, fragrant essential oils, and rose petals. She was living in only rented beds, so she had to use the public showers whenever she needed to clean herself. She had not had a proper relaxing bath since she came out of prison. She would not waste this great opportunity today. After soaking for some time, Sabrina felt that her whole body was comfortable, and she started to feel sleepy. In a drowsy state, she climbed out of the bathtub. Her body was still wet, and she opened the door to reach for the bathrobe. However, she collided with a tall and well-built body. Sabrina screamed at the top of her lungs in shock. Chapter 8. Sebastian was also stunned as he looked at the woman in front of him. Sabrina's body was not covered, and her skin flushed a little red after the bath. Her short wet hair was messily scattered, and her palm-sized face was covered with water droplets and steam. Standing shivering before Sebastian in this way made her look helpless. Sebastian was not wearing much as well. He had a tall and strong figure with well-defined muscles, bronzed skin, broad shoulders, and narrow hips. His solid and steel-like right arm had 2 frightening scars, but it fully highlighted his masculine dominance and overbearing force. When Sabrina saw his scars, her whole heart contracted as she was frightened. However, she was also embarrassed as he completely saw her whole body. She covered her front in panic, but no matter how she tried to cover it, some parts could still be seen. She stretched her trembling arm to reach for the bathrobe as she wanted to put it on. But her hand was shaking like crazy. I thought you were not coming back. Why did you come back? Her teeth were chattering, and her whole face flushed like the branding iron. She got the bathrobe, but she could not put it on properly. After she wore the robe with great difficulty, she realized the robe was so long that the edges dragged to the ground. Sabrina then realized that it was a men's bathrobe. It was wide, big, and long. She simply wrapped herself with the bathrobe and walked out. But the more nervous she was, more trouble followed her. She stepped on the bottom of the bathrobe, and her whole body fell over. Ah! Sabrina let out another scream. Sebastian raised an arm and pulled her in so that she did not fall. The man smelled a familiar scent, as if he had smelled it before from somewhere. He gently closed his eyes and lowered his head onto the back of her neck. Sabrina cried out in fear. Let go of me. Sebastian was suddenly awoken. D***men, he cursed. He picked up a bath towel and wrapped Sabrina up. He carried her to the second bedroom and threw her onto the big bed before turning around to leave. Bang! The room door was shut. He walked into the bathroom, turned on the cold shower, and sprayed himself furiously. Sabrina was curled up on the bed in the second bedroom, hugging her legs and blaming herself deeply. Why did she not resent his hug at all? Sabrina Scott, do you really want to marry into a wealthy family? You are too shameless. Sebastian was so disgusted by you. How could he possibly be interested in you? A woman who just came out of prison and is now pregnant with a child. Do not let Sebastian despise you from the bottom of his heart. She spent a restless night in the second bedroom. She woke up early the following day and saw no one in the living room. Hence, she picked up a notepad and left a note. Her penmanship was as strong, neat, and sharp as the last time. Please excuse me, Mr. Ford. I thought you wouldn't come back here to rest, and I offended you by using your bathroom yesterday. As it was in the past, I would pretend that nothing has happened, and I hope you would also do the same. After leaving the note, Sabrina went to the hospital to visit Grace. She did not meet the housekeeper that morning, so she understood that it was Grace who had painstakingly made the arrangement. She wanted Sebastian and Sabrina to spend the night together. When Sabrina arrived at the ward, Grace's eyes began to survey her body. Sabby, why are you here so early? You should not be out of bed today. You should rest more. Sabrina was embarrassed and said, Mom, don't talk about it. Tell me, were you happy last night? Grace asked with a smile. Yes. Sabrina vaguely nodded. Then she flung herself into Grace's arms. Grace hugged her and said, Do you know how well you and Sebastian are suited for each other? I was not mistaken about you two. I would definitely give you a splendid wedding. Thank you, Mom. Although this was just an act, Sabrina still felt appreciative of Grace. For Grace, this was not an act. She truly wanted to give Sabrina a privileged life. Sabrina spent the whole morning sitting in Grace's ward to keep her company. She joked and laughed with Grace. As Grace was still a sick person, she needed to close her eyes to rest for a while after a moment of chatting and laughing. Sabrina left when Grace fell asleep. She had to hurry up and find a job. As she walked on the road, she inadvertently saw an advertisement posted on a corner of a billboard at the bus stop. Recruiting architectural assistant. Sabrina studied architectural engineering in college, but her studies were interrupted by her arrest during her sophomore year. Also, Sabrina had a good relationship with Grace in prison, partly because Grace was also an architecture designer with high professional standards. The two often studied architecture together when they had nothing else to do in prison. It was such a pity that Sabrina had no university degree, was just released from prison, and was pregnant. Companies that offered positions like this would not want her. However, she still held the mindset to just try her luck. Sabrina drew a few structural diagrams that were more practical with a pen and paper. She went to the printing company and paid to have them photographed. After receiving it in her inbox, she hit the send button. As she finished the matters at hand, she received a call from an unknown number. Hello, Sabrina. Celine's incredibly smug voice could be heard on the other end of the call. How did you know my phone number? Sabrina asked suspiciously. Huh? Celine laughed. I was able to find out where you lived. Wouldn't it be too easy for me to know your number? What's the matter? Sabrina asked. It was my fault yesterday. I was in a bad mood. You could come around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to collect your mother's pictures. Celine's tone was unusually friendly. Sabrina was speechless. She did not contemplate Celine's drastic change between yesterday and today. She only wanted to get her mother's pictures out of there quickly. At around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Sabrina went to the Lynn residence again. She entered the door and gazed blankly at the lady of the house, Jade. "Where are my mother's pictures? Please hand it to me, and I would leave immediately." "Why are you in a hurry, Sabrina?" Jade smiled in an unusually nice manner. "Since you are here, come have a seat." "Sorry, not interested," Sabrina said calmly. "Wow," Jade said in an enigmatic tone. "Somebody's highly conceited. Not even willing to visit the house where you were raised for 8 years? It looked like you don't need the Lynn family's financial support now? Are you going to marry above your station soon?" "That's right. I have found a husband that is 100 times wealthier than the Lynn family. Perhaps I will be charitable to your family in return in the future." Sabrina lifted her chin and arrogantly looked at Jade. Jade was speechless, but her teeth almost broke as she gnashed them in rage. "Sabrina, you dared to make such a boastful claim? Then bring your rich husband here, and we could all get to know each other." Celine's voice came from the door. Sabrina turned around and saw a man and a woman walked in. The woman was Celine. The man, to her surprise, was Sebastian. Chapter 9. Sabrina's heart sank for a moment. Of course, an honorable single man with such good backgrounds like Sebastian would not be lacking in girlfriends. The reason why Sebastian was married to her was only to let his dying mother leave this world with no regrets. However, Sabrina never would have expected that Sebastian's girlfriend would be Celine. To Sabrina, life was full of irony. The people who once oppressed her were becoming happier and more honorable. On the other hand, Sabrina had her future ruined, was pregnant but unmarried, and did not even know the name of her child's father. Sabrina felt like she was a clown as she looked at the couple that seemed to be a match made in heaven. It seemed that Celine asking Sabrina to come and collect her mother's pictures was an excuse. Celine's true intention was to show off her boyfriend in front of Sabrina deliberately. After concealing the sadness deep within her heart, Sabrina calmly said, "How would a tainted woman like me find a wealthy husband? I was only joking just now. Since you have a guest, I would not bother you any longer. Please bring my mother's pictures to me, and I would leave immediately." She did not look at Sebastian, as if they had not known each other at all. Sebastian was also expressionless. He did not want to come to the Lynn family, but he could not disregard the fact that Celine had saved his life before. Hence, he took the time today and made a trip here. He also did not expect to meet Sabrina here. Lincoln and Jade were secretly feeling ecstatic after they saw how Sebastian and Sabrina were not acquainted. Sabrina really had no clue that the man she slept with not only did not die, but became the most honorable man in South City overnight. Celine exchanged a look with her parents for a moment, then said, "Sabrina, my boyfriend just came. And you wish to leave now? That's too disrespectful. My boyfriend might have mistaken that we had been mistreating you." Celine turned around and said to Sebastian, "You had no idea, darling Sebastian. My family had been paying for her living expenses and studies since she was a teenager. But this girl still misbehaved. She was put in jail during her sophomore year." Sebastian shot a disgusting glance at Sabrina, then said to Celine, "Have lesser contact with such despicable characters in the future." "As you wish, darling Sebastian, but she still has to dine with us today. No matter what, she has spent 8 years living with us, and my whole family loves her," Celine said in an extremely gentle and mild manner. Taking advantage of an angle that was out of Sebastian's sight, Celine did not forget to smile recklessly at Sabrina. What Celine wanted was to show Sabrina how sweet she and Sebastian can be. If it was not for fear of having Sebastian finding out, Celine would have told Sabrina directly, "The man that you saved by sacrificing the most precious thing a girl could give is actually the most honorable man in South City, and that man is now my husband." She especially wanted to witness with her own eyes how Sabrina would die from anger. Seeing that the whole Lynn family never mentioned the pictures, Sabrina answered immediately, "I will stay for dinner." She was worried she had no place to have dinner anyway. It did not matter if she was a third wheel, or if she was looked down upon. As long as she could take her mother's pictures away, it would not be a wasted trip. After she sat down, Only then Jade handed 2 pictures to Sabrina. Sabrina looked at her mother's pictures, and her tears almost dripped down instantly. She had not even managed to find out how her mother died. But right now, she has to eat here. The humiliation in her heart could not be described. The money Sebastian was going to give her must be claimed. Once she has gotten the money, she would start to investigate her mother's cause of death. If it were the Lin family that had made her mother die, she would make them pay back 100 times more. She kept the pictures in her bag and sat alone at the corner of the couch. The Lin family members could no longer care about her, as they were focused on discussing with Sebastian. Young Master Sebastian, what do you think about your marriage with Celine? The way Lincoln tried to please Sebastian was as petty and low as how people in the olden days would act when wanting the wealthy families to accept their daughter as a mistress. Still, Lincoln and Sebastian deliberately showed off in front of Sabrina. I would marry your daughter, but only after 2 months. Sebastian's tone was cold and detached. He resented the way the Lin family discussed marriage matters in front of an outsider. Also Sabrina. Obviously, she was his legal wife, but she acted like all this had nothing to do with her. She was indeed a scheming manipulator at such a young age. Seeing how Sebastian was sullen and cold, Lincoln, who was actually his elder, did not even dare to refute anything. He only echoed along and said, everything shall follow your arrangement. However, Celine acted cutely and said, darling Sebastian, I couldn't wait. The weather is going to turn cold in 2 months. I wouldn't look good in the wedding gown then. Can we have our wedding this month, pretty please? Sebastian especially despised women who were fake and acted cutely. If Celine had not lost her first time to him, he would have already left. He replied coldly, the wedding would be in 2 months later. Celine smiled in an extremely awkward manner. All right. She turned her head and glared at Sabrina maliciously. Sabrina was looking in the direction of the dining room and was not paying attention to their discussion. Did their wedding date have anything to do with her? She was hungry. She was pregnant, so she would get hungry easily. Sabrina sensed Celine's gaze on her back, so she turned around and asked Celine, is it time to eat yet? Celine was speechless. Like a punch to cotton, her malicious gaze had no effect on Sabrina. Sebastian, on the other hand, could not help but steal one more glance at Sabrina. Seeing Sabrina's composure, his heart throbbed a little. The maid served up the dishes, and Sabrina instantly had her eye on the peach pudding cake. That was Celine's favorite dessert. As soon as the cake was placed on the table, Sabrina took it and commenced to eat it before Celine could take it. You! Celine looked at her in disbelief. Jade was even more furious, but she could not explode because Sebastian was present, so she faked a smile and said, Sabrina, I didn't know you liked dessert so much. I had always wanted to try but never could. Today I finally got to eat it. Sabrina nodded while she ate. Ho ho. Jade laughed as she gritted her teeth. What else do you want to eat? Sabrina looked up and glanced at the dining table. Salmon, shrimp balls, broccoli. She knew they would be cursing her hundreds and thousands of times in their hearts. However, it was them who insisted that she stayed for dinner. The baby in her belly was her only family, so the most important thing was to let the baby have a feast. She has no one in this world to love her, so she could only love herself. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, she placed her fork down and said, I am full, I am leaving. Celine already could not care about acting cute to Sebastian. Instead, she provoked Sabrina with a jealous tone. It's night time now, so you had to rush back to start your business, right?